Good afternoon. How are you today?
Good afternoon. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really thankful for you to be able to make time for me to have this interview with me today. And today is the 1st of November, and we're in the comfort of our bedrooms conducting this interview. And I am her interviewer, Lyndon Wynn, and this is Christian Rodriguez. So, if we will, let's get started into this interview. So I have a few questions I'll be giving you today, and I hope you'll answer them to the best of your abilities. The first question I have is, what is your experience or any knowledge regarding the experiences of women in politics?
So, my knowledge regarding the experiences of women in politics is simply being a woman myself who has followed politics for the last few years and who has read a couple of books and articles that have really highlighted those experiences of women. And, I think what women face in politics is pretty transparent and clear to everyone. Because a woman being made to feel a little inferior is something that men do not hide, especially those in politics.
The answer is amazing. I really do resonate with everything you said there about how women aren't really shown, and it's mostly now men in society these days. And following on what you said, how have you seen women's bodily rights changing into what they've developed into now?
I would say that in my lifetime, which is not too long, women's bodily rights have always been a conversation amongst many people, especially people who aren't women. But I would say that there were little to no changes as we were growing up regarding this issue. And things have stayed consistent for the last couple of years until last year when they overruled Roe v. Wade and really changed what I grew to know and understand about the government and how they view women.
I really follow that because recently we haven't really lived for long, and throughout the time that we've lived, our experiences have been pretty well brought out by the experiences that happened in the past, and we've been having a quite steady time. Superficially, we might not know about what's been happening internally, but I can really feel for you what you said about the more recent issues today versus regardless of what you said about the female rights. So, what are your thoughts on the intervention by men in women's rights? Since you mentioned that nowadays the laws are changing and men were being more dominant.
That's a great question. Yeah, I believe that men have really no place in the discussion about women's rights unless they're there to understand and really support women and what we are trying to fight for, especially when it comes to any bodily rights. I think men should, instead of concerning themselves with what we should be allowed not to do or to do, they should just see us as humans, as equals to them. And it's really hard to see that, men feel that they have the right to decide things for us, when it has nothing to do with them.
Yeah, and I feel it makes it a lot more difficult for us right now, considering the age we're at, where we will be soon starting families. We're going to be soon getting into the age of where we're going to be dealing with women's rights, which is some of the things of your job. And say you're getting into a family, if you're going to have a child, it's something that you have to think a lot about with men getting involved into it now. And so, how have the abortion laws that you mentioned previously impacted the women or those around you?
I think all women have been affected by men intervening in women's rights. And I've personally felt this when they overruled Roe v. Wade, therefore making abortion laws more strict or harsh, or really making them altogether illegal in some states. And although I live in California, where they luckily leave the decision up to women, to the decision on what they can do with their own bodies, I felt like it was just violating, the person I am, violating women in general. And with that being done, people became more comfortable sharing their own personal beliefs and thoughts on abortions, that they were wrong, making me and I know many other women feel like we were wrong, we were evil for just believing that women should have the choice.
I completely agree with that. It's been all over the media. It's been covered for quite a while now on many of the difficulties that women are facing because of that law being overturned. And it's really disheartening to have to see all these fellow women facing such hard times that will actually seem really crazy to anyone else seeing it. However, these people who are making the laws and stuff aren't really actually seeing how horrible these are getting inflicted on women. And
Yeah.
so, how have you been affected personally by the change of this law? I know that even though you mentioned you aren't in or you're about to be the age to be affected, how do you feel you have been or will be going to?
I think I've been affected right now pretty, I would say, like in my mental state or my views regarding the world that we live in, or specifically, the country that we live in. I think it's already so hard to be a woman in this world, and we are looked at as inferior and just having rights taken away. Like you said, although I do luckily live in a state that has not taken away these rights, it it's very disheartening, it's very disappointing to see that people can do this to women, and I feel that, you know, maybe California won't be safe forever, and as I'm growing into an adult and possibly wanting to start a family or maybe not wanting to start a family and getting into situations with myself, I don't know what the future entails for me. I think it's a bit scary to really know what could happen as a woman.
It is truly a bit scary the fact that we'll be facing these times and there's not much that we can do except these circumstances that have been placed on us as no matter I'm assuming how many laws that we or how many petitions we try to place out, the law is pretty certain, although it can be changed if we do put efforts towards it. Men have really deep-rooted standards and such, as we've been seeing on the media and stuff. And I'm sure it'll make it really difficult for us to not only change their mindsets that they've been having for a long time, but making efforts towards like altering this law in general. And it's really disheartening that we don't know if we're going to encounter those men because we are very fortunate to live in California. However, you never know that you're going to meet these types of people and you're going to be having all these ideals and circumstances forced on you that isn't very pleasant at all. And so, talking about changing the law, what are some of the changes or differences that you'd have wanted in abortion law or its making and revision processes?
What I really want is for people to just back out of women's lives and, leave it up to each woman to make their own decision about their life and what they exactly want to do. The choices people make, especially if they have no consequences to you, I think shouldn't really involve anyone else. People should not want to impose their beliefs and should just let people be. No one should be forced to have an abortion and no one should be forced to not have one. I think, we're all people who live completely different lives and decisions so personal and so intimate to certain people should be left up to them.
That's also definitely a big problem that we're seeing now, moving past the woman aspect. We can see a lot in political matters, just regular day media, that everyone's just becoming more involved in each other's lives, even though we're all separated by the idea of social media. Everyone is continuously connected by chat comments, DMing, messaging platforms, and everyone is being really involved by criticizing and going on multiple platforms and involving themselves in negative ways. And that bringing back to women can be really negatively affecting because we're almost a bit too ingrained in each other's lives right now because something to do with the woman's body and themselves should be their own actions and own thoughts and beliefs, considering the fact that America is deemed as a free country after all. And following that, what have you been doing in response to your well-being being jeopardized by this law?
Honestly, in the beginning, when it first broke out that Roe v. Wade was overruled, I really felt lost, like there was nothing I could do and there was nothing left to do. I felt so heartbroken for not only myself, but for all the other women who are really going to feel the effects of this. But after a while of, really thinking about it, I talked to the women around me to seek comfort and as well to comfort them. And I'm also now not afraid to really speak up about um, the politics of abortion or women in general, especially to people who may not agree with me or who really oppose those. And, I think it's important to not only talk to women, but to talk to others outside, for to really educate everyone on such a important topic.
Course, yeah. I remember right after that law was overturned, I was really in fear at the time, thinking of my future, and I'm sure a lot of people were feeling that at the same time. But of course, with how many ideals were conflicting, we didn't really feel like anyone was backing us up, considering the population of men and some of the women who aren't really for women, for women's choice, I guess. And we would have been really scared, but after seeing the multiple positive responses of people actually supporting women's choice, it's gotten a lot better, and now a lot of us feel like we're backed up, but we're also it's again because we're fortunately in California that we don't have to deal with this such difficult time, and it's really unfortunate for all the women out there. And so, what are your experiences or knowledge on the views and actions of those who support the men's decision in anti-abortion?
So, I know those who oppose abortion or, specifically giving the people the option to get one have the belief that a fetus is a human life that deserves a right as much as the next person. They feel get those people that get abortions are murderers and they should not be allowed to commit such an act. And personally, so my experience, I think most of these people come from a religious background that condemn such an act. I do unfortunately have family who believes in such things who are really strongly opposed to abortion. And this is simply because of the religion that they practice. And although I support all religions and really, everyone should have the choice of what they can do, I think it's upsetting that people want you to follow their religious beliefs, even if you may not practice that. And yeah,
And do you think those who are anti-abortion value an unborn baby's rights over a woman's?
I do. I think that might be a harsh thing to say, but I do think it's the truth. These people are all about rights when it comes to an unborn baby who knows absolutely nothing of this world, who has no conscience. And, they ignore these women who are suffering now, who are living in a world who are conscious of what's going on around them. And, these women deserve more than what they're given. And people don't put these women first that, could be going through a hard time, could be unfortunately not wanting to bring a baby into their unfortunate lives or anything. And yeah, I think they definitely do.
And you mentioned a lot about how you find out that people had a bit of conflicting views with you on this idea of anti-abortion and abortion rights. Would you, if it's not too personal, allow us to hear how you ended up finding out about those different views and how you possibly addressed it?
Of course. So, when things like this were happening in the current moment, I know politics aren't really a friendly topic to talk over dinner or things like that, but with my family, it definitely comes up sometimes. And because a lot of them share similar views, they just discuss it as pretty normal about not wanting to. They think people shouldn't have an abortion, that they agree with the overruling. And, I can't, someone who opposes that, I can't sit there and let them talk about that. So that's when I really understood where their beliefs lied. And I just shared my end and tried to educate and explain that, although they hold certain beliefs, they shouldn't be imposing that on other people because you don't know other people's situations. And, it's really kind of hard to know that people that you love or people that are so close hold these beliefs that you don't support at all. But, as you talk more through it and you educate one another, I think it can become a little easier.
Have you, after all that questioning or all that education, the help you've like tried to talk with them, do you feel that in a way they might have changed some of their mindset or understood deeper of the reason why you had that belief and also why they should have the belief that you're siding with?
I actually do think some of them have come around to maybe not fully changing their minds, but definitely understanding exactly where I'm coming from. And I really appreciate that, they're growing to be, a bigger person, to be more empathetic. Because I think a lot of them thought that, people who are pro choice want to just have everyone get abortions. But I think they really come to understood that it was simply just letting people make the decision for themselves. And unfortunately, though, some people that I've had these discussions with did not come around and still fully believe in what they, grew up to know or have come to their own terms with. And with that, I just, those kinds of people, you still want to try and get to them, educate them, but not be as pushy or, really imposing on them.
And riding on the idea that a lot of these people, that's what they grew up to know, it's also disheartening to know that a lot of families have been instilling the ideas into their children, whether it's political, cultural, or things such as that. And here in this example, it's ideas about women. We we will see it in society nowadays where a lot of the men nowadays they say certain things about women that is really not for women, and it's like completely flabbergasting to hear. And it just shows a lot about how some families, some cultures view women, how they force women to do this, do that, and very have a very negative outlook on women. And that's just how they were born, how they were taught to think, and it doesn't seem at all unusual to them, how they think it's completely normal and are willing to accept that fact. And it's really difficult to understand their point of view. And not only that, it's also difficult to see how you could possibly change that point of view. And not to mention, it's not to sound very mean, but it's also because of these previous instilled values on these people that it also makes it really difficult to fight for our cause, fight for women at this time, and just get our idea through without being so evil to them in a sense, because we have such opposing views of allowing a child to be killed. It could be seen as something completely like drastic to them, if they're valuing a life that much. And it really just makes a woman's journey at this time very difficult, and not many people know what to do.
Yeah.
And so bringing it back, how serious do you think the men around you and possibly in politics will are taking women and their rights?
I don't think men, you know, around me, those in politics, any man for that matter, really take women that seriously. And especially when it comes to, our rights and what we fight for. I think it's because men will really never understand, you know, everything that it means to be a woman and the hardships women face, simply because they are not women. But I think also there's a little bit a lack of understanding or maybe a lack of empathy on men's side to really care to understand exactly where women come from. You know, I've had instances talking to other men who just think that a lot of women are over dramatic or that it's not that serious. And hearing that it's really disappointing to know because I would like to think that if men shared their own thoughts about, any hardships that they face, that women would be there to support and, to help them. But I just don't think men hold that same value or anything towards women.
That's a very good point. Nowadays, that you see a lot of men, as I mentioned before, they aren't really for women. And of course, they have those deeply rooted values that they haven't really shown. And despite all the difficulties they face and how much women are there for them, of course, that doesn't talk for all women. There's always good and bad people. And in these instances, talking about the good people, these men can encounter the best of women who are all supportive and can be possibly the more emotional, supportive, and best wife there is, girlfriend, or just a friend there. However, in the end, women are still facing the disrespect of being cheated on, or that woman simply wasn't good enough for him, no matter how many sacrifices she makes, and he still looks for someone else. There's always these lots of disrespecting actions that maybe some men are taking on the woman, and we after facing all of these, there are of course some evil women, and it does kind of back up the men's claim a little of women are being dramatic and those things. However, nowadays, do you think the change in abortion laws opens a door for people to continue to suppress women in other ways?
100%. I do think that this definitely opens lots of doors, and that is why women fought so hard when the overruling was still up in the air. And it's why we signed petitions. It's why we try to educate those around us because we knew it would only be the beginning of worse to come. Taking away these rights that women previously fought so hard for is crazy. Just to take away something so easily, what stops them from continuing to take away rights that we just got. And not only does this open a door to continuing to suppress women, but it opens a door to suppress so many other minority groups, because I think it goes to show that there's a lot of people here in America specifically who support the government's decision to suppress women. And, if they can do this to women, what stops them from doing it to other groups of people who, are seen as inferior to that of a white male American?
That's right. Nowadays, we see a lot of people, they're even moving past women, they're not really afraid to do what they say, do what they want, and it makes it a very sort of scary experience where you don't know what they'll be doing, even it could be the most outrageous things, they still choose to do it. And there's just nowadays a lot of, as I mentioned before, the lack of respect, the lack of care almost for people around them. And you can't really nowadays find such good people anymore and such people who are doing great things for almost the political or cultural world nowadays. We're always facing these more difficult and challenging times because of their actions now. And I just wanted to talk to you about a lot of the actions that happened back in the past as well. In some of the instances that I've learned, women were really deeply unvalued at the time. As you mentioned, though, they were fighting through lots of history. And some of those instances were the fact that women did fight in the war. And they're from this point, you can see that they're contributing almost exactly the same as the men. However, these women after the war, they're immediately thrown aside and set to get kicked off of their workplaces and almost locked up in their homes to do these same things that they've been doing for men the entire time, which is managing the housework and being very demure and almost basically a servant for their husband. And so, how do you feel about all those times in history where women were almost basically a slave to their husbands?
I think it's just, sad to hear and sad to know about, and really just disappointing because honestly, much has not changed. And, as unfortunate as it is, women are constantly being put in that box of, just being the inferior gender and to to live their lives supporting and taking care of men. And, I think this, us getting our rights taken away for abortions goes to show that, you know, even as times have gone on and women have constantly fought to get out of that box they've been placed in for so long in so many instances, that it's really hard to change, and that we still have so much more to go through, to fight for, and that it stays being a consistent and important issue that women should really want to take part in and to really support.
Do you feel that there are a lot of women trying to support women's rights and the causes now compared to back then, or just compared to how many who don't support it?
I think there is a fair amount of women who really support, and I would hope who really support women's and our movements and wanting to gain rights. Um, but I actually think sometimes that there's lots of women who really don't. And I think it's because I'm not exactly sure of what it is, but whether it's religious or whether they're their husbands, I think a lot of them maybe, are just told not to believe that way, or possibly, scared to speak up. And I think now more people care, and I would say more young people care. And I think that's important. There's lots of young people, and young people aren't afraid to speak out, especially our generation, to speak on social media. And so I think that is where we really see the growth of people supporting, especially women. And it's just nice to see that young women, um, are really there to support the movements and are growing up and realizing that, the fight never ends and you have to continue to learn and educate.
And then, as you mentioned of social media, were you at that time during the Roe v. Wade overturning, were you taking any steps on social media or any steps more specifically that were trying to help towards fighting for women's rights?
Yes, I actually did. I think social media is the perfect space to do so, to really advocate for things, especially if maybe you can go out to protest or things like that. I personally, found petitions online, ones that I've signed myself. Um, and I posted, things on my own story on Instagram, for I may not have many followers, but for the people in my life to see that I care about this, and hopefully that if they didn't know about it beforehand, now they will, and they'll in, take time out of their day to, sign a petition or to share the post again, to talk about it. Social media is a perfect platform to do so. And I think everyone should really use it to their advantage.
I think that's an amazing action that you did because you're really proving that no matter how large or how small the platform is, what's really important is that you hold these values that you're willing to show to everyone and you're willing to fight for your cause. Even if you didn't have many followers, you still posted on social media constantly and you sign petitions. And you're not only that, you're despite what you cannot do, you're fighting for your cause and educating all those people that may see it. It doesn't matter if you believe that many people might not be able to see it, but it's the fact that you had that mindset to bring change, no matter how much change that you thought you could bring. It's very valuable that you're bringing a little step towards fighting for your cause, and not only your cause, it's for most of the women in the world who say might need it, might not need it, or might not know they need it yet. And do you or were there anyone around you doing those similar actions, or did you try to encourage anyone to take similar actions to those?
Yes. So sister, my sisters, I would say, are ones who definitely um did the same things, took the same steps that I did. And when it was going around, I was at school with friends. It's something that I would bring up occasionally, to talk about it, or if it organically got brought up or something, you know, letting people know what steps they can take, and especially those, talking to people, especially being so young. Some people feel that they can't really do much, there's no money to give. They can't do this because, parents. And, I just try to let them know that, there are other steps that you can take, things that we can do right now. And I was really glad, some had some people in my life who did take those steps, and I was very thankful for that.
That's amazing. At that time, you mentioned school. At the time, was your school, did you feel like they had addressed the issue or addressed enough of the issue regarding abortion?
Um, I would say no, that I don't think the school ever addressed it at all, really, like itself. But I will say, um, I did have a government class, and that was definitely a topic of conversation. You know, it's safe to say that schools and teachers can't really pick a side or take things like that, take into consideration of kids and their beliefs. Um, but even though the school itself didn't come out saying something or whatever, it was nice to see that some teachers still made it like a framework of a class or a project to really get kids thinking about, what things mean and what overruling means, and like how overruling such a big thing can lead to certain effects. So, yeah, it was nice to see that there was some people out there speaking up, especially in a school setting.
And at that time, did you feel like a lot of people in that classroom were following what your teacher was hopefully supporting?
Surprisingly, there was more kids, I think, who did not who supported the overruling of Roe v. Wade, which, surprised me, but, um, at the same time, these kids are being raised in a household that has certain beliefs, like you said, parents instill, as you grow up, parents instill their own beliefs into you. Um, but it was nice to see that there was some students, especially other girls in there who, if someone spoke of something wrongly or, just said something kind of offensive about women in general, that we were there to support and to not attack them, but educate them in like a stern manner, that that's not okay.
And then that concludes my interview. I really want to thank you for being here today and answering all these questions, whether they were really personal or not too personal. And it was really nice having to talk to you about what women are facing today. You gave me really amazing answers that I personally really agree with. And I hope that you continue with the things that you mentioned today and help women fight step by step for our rights and specifically abortion. And round of applause. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, thank you so much for having me.